Welcome to Two Taps and Friends. Grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's dive into another episode of Two Taps and Friends.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Two Taps and Friends. This is Daniel Rosenberg, and I have a very special colleague, friend of mine, guest, Jason Kollock, on here. He is our resident Bitcoin expert, right? He's a friend of mine, colleague of mine, and he's always talking to me. You know, everybody's talking about Bitcoin a lot now, but very few people actually know what they're talking about. So you're a guy that knows what they're talking about. I said, dude, come on, let's talk and see if you can make viewers understand what we're talking about. So welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Danny.
So I think that we were trying to kind of figure out a timeline of how we kind of structure this, like, almost insurmountable, it seems like, to the layman, an insurmountable topic that most people don't understand. Where do we break it down? How do we explain it? I think a good place we wanted to land was like the history of currency a little bit, right?
Right.
'Cause tell us about the history of currency in a brief, in the most non-boring way we can, right?
Yep.
How we get to here.
Yeah, so it is a complex topic, but, you know, in terms of just helping people understand, I like to kind of go through a regression of, you know, Mesopotamia, you know, and like the beginning of man, you know, and you have your traders and the furs and the woods, and different regions are producing certain things as people, you know, propagate the world and find things,
right?
you know. And so, you know, as these groups come to be and find themselves, of course, you know, they find value in the work that it takes to extract these things, whether it's hunting, you know, there's work that's proven because, of course, now you're holding a pelt. There's shells, you know, that maybe you're at the beach that's, you know, a proof of work concept because you're holding shells. Someone had to go do something to get this and then perceive the value in it, right? So I always like to kind of start with literally there, the beginning, and then, you know, you find gold and cultures assume this shiny thing and this metal that ultimately becomes kind of found all over the world, and that starts to be kind of, you know, used for different commerce. And then, you know, induction of fire and electricity, it starts bending the metals, molding the metals, printing on the things. You have the printing press, you know, then evolve. You have the cash system, you know, and all these things have a perceived value, which then, you know, I always say that when the infrastructure changes, right? So when, again, that fire is an infrastructure concept.
Right.
The advent of electricity is an infrastructure concept.
Right.
When that infrastructure changes, money changes, and our relationship to money changes. Then leading us, you know, as we've kind of digressed.
Like we went from gold to cash.
Right, you know, and so, and of course, you know,
digital.
more inventions, more, you know, opportunity for people to create, you know, it's just the human nature. So now we find ourselves in a digital world, and therefore we have digital currency, you know. So that's kind of, you know, the regression through how currency has evolved.
So where did Bitcoin come from? Give me a little bit of quick background, because, you know, some people know, but tell me a little bit about that.
Right.
I'd rather hear you tell me about that than some of the people that are telling me.
Right. No worries. So without getting too granular, and like we kind of joked to part two, but at least initially, it's an open source software, right? So you have a Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a gentleman or a group of people or a female.
We don't know.
We have no idea.
Person,
yep,
we don't know
pseudonym. Yep.
We know it's a person, though,
We know,
right?
yeah, we know it's people. We just don't know, or a person.
Okay.
We just don't know if it's you know, like, again, if it's a solo person that acted on their own, or if it is a group of people that was Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, Satoshi did work with some core developer teams. I can't name any of them off the top of my head, but I know that there were 7 other folks. So it was a group of 7, if Satoshi might have been 8. But either way, these people worked on the first rendition, or the first, you know, digital currency, and then that was released on an open source platform, being the Bitcoin Core network is what it's literally called, the Bitcoin Core. And so that kind of came to be through developers who are much more intelligent than me, creating this software and then deploying it to the world. And because it's open source, it's decentralized, right? So there's no centralized authority that created the software on their own and then house the intellect. It's decentralized to the internet, to the open network.
Right, but let me stop you, because I'm trying to break it down where we would lose a viewer, right?
Yeah.
Where you lose me almost, but I kind of get it now. So how does a person just decide, I'm going to make something that's value, right? Like, so he makes a software, but who are you to say that this is something that people will want, that'll be worth anything?
Right.
How does that work?
Right. So the value is in the security, right? So blockchain in and of itself works off of cryptography. And cryptography, at its essence towards blockchain, is called cryptographic hash functions. Again, I'm not a mathematist, but
Right, all terms that probably just flew over everybody, though.
right. So you might know cryptography for some of the things that you're hearing about with like WhatsApps and Signal, right? So these are conversations that essentially are just hosted over the internet, and all it is locking in a peer or a user with another peer or user,
Okay.
and all of the data that's being shared in between is essentially built on this cryptography, which is the security, right? So the security hosts the value, right? So where people say, oh, I'm worried about my conversation or these messages or whatever the case might be, right? People move to it because of the security.
Got it.
Right?
What's the one what was the last one you sent out? WhatsApp?
Signal.
Signal.
Yeah,
It's the most
it's hot right
secure
now.
one right
Right.
now,
It's
right?
yeah, so secure that now of
Not
course
that secure. Like
there was an
I deal with
incident.
FBI agents.
Yeah.
They cracked it, by the way, just for the viewers to know.
yeah.
Like, still, but it's one of the
Well,
more secure.
I'm sure they didn't crack it, but
they know how to get in.
yeah, they were pressed on some type of litigation, I'm sure, to have the person who was being pursued, have to open up, but the software cryptography in and of itself is you can't do it.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, but I'm just as the thought comes, I'm going to jump in because when people give a long-winded diatribe on it, especially when it goes over people's head, nobody really follows it. So so what he's in essence you're saying is when he creates a currency, even though it has no value that you could trade for
at the moment,
but it's
of
so
inception.
secure.
Yep.
That no centralized government or bank can rob that value. It will remain peer to peer.
Correct.
That's the sell.
Correct, because of its open source application, because of how
When you say open source, again, dumb that down.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So open source is I'm trying to think. There's I think it's Firefox. No, MIT, GitHub. These are some other open source applications. So these are softwares that essentially are shared, okay?
Okay.
And they have to achieve a consensus. So you can create it, okay? And then when it becomes active, right? That is relinquishing the control from the original core development. All right.
So it's controlled by the banking system or whatever it
So
may be.
so you would have, like in Bitcoin's case, you had a core development team
Okay.
that used an open source software platform to develop the initial technology on.
Okay.
And then when they pushed it live, right? Because this might be the granular part, but real quick.
But they lost control of it.
They relinquished control.
Relinquished, right.
Yeah, they didn't really lose control. They knew what they were doing to create it, and then to deploy it and make it live so that all parts of people who can access the internet can use it, right, and interact with it. That was a knowing effort. They knew that they were creating something that ultimately, through again some higher level discussions and what they understand as developers, they knew that they ultimately would kind of turn it over to the general public, right, to the world.
And the concept would sell people, right?
And the concept,
They could understand
the concept of security, and then ultimately now what we understand about Bitcoin being divisible, right? So the divisibility of Bitcoin is what is
right. Just
so
viewers
valuable.
understand, you don't have to buy a coin that's worth, I don't know,
80,000 right now, 100,000. Yeah, right.
You could buy 10,000 worth of it, and you have a sliver.
Right,
And
correct.
It's not a physical.
You have
coin.
1/8. Yeah, it can go all the way out to 8 decimal places.
Wow. So I
Yep.
mean, you can buy
Yeah.
$1 worth of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's funny, the first place that it's come up that I think that people were trading it, I don't know if this is true, but the first time I heard of Bitcoin, this is a funny story, and we'll go back to all this, right, is I had a person that I knew was ordering like all kinds of shady stuff of that Silk Road. You heard of that Silk Road?
Oh, yeah.
It was a website where you
Yeah.
could buy like drugs, you could buy guns, you could buy whatever. And the person shows it to me, and I'm like, "You're out of your mind. What are you doing? Like this is." And he was shipping it. We were in offices, and he was a different business than me, but we were. It was like shared spaces. It's like shipping stuff into like the floor. I'm like, "Are you crazy? Like we're gonna get raided here. What are you doing? Like how are you paying for this? With a credit card?"
Yeah.
I said, "No. There's these little like it's almost like in the video game arcades. They're giving tokens, and we use these tokens."
Yeah.
So he was using these Bitcoin. I think that was one of the first places that it came up. Is that true?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously now, like, then when they got raided and they got in trouble, like the FBI picked up on all that.
Right.
I remember they were like trading it like very cheap. It was
Right.
like a dollar for dollar,
probably
even
less.
cheaper, less.
Yeah, probably
So
cents.
when Bitcoin blew up, I remember it hit me, and I still know this person. I call him like, dude, tell me you have those coins, because I think he had like 100 coins, probably 200 coins.
Yeah, a lot of people
And
didn't
those he
realize
says
what they
they're
had.
gone. He can't get into them, and they're Never Neverland. So
Yeah, yeah.
is that accurate? Is that the first place that the people were trading for things?
Yes,
or-
Silk Road was one of the first applications. I know that there was also some gaming applications for it, where people were trading certain elements, or what even now could almost be looked at as NFTs. So imagine you're into gaming, and there's a certain type of suit of armor, or there's something in the game that you wanted to have. You could trade digital goods, whatever. Again, perceived value, right? The whole thing. Even today, I'd give you $10 of cash, and you and I just perceive that $10, based off of an authoritarian kind of dictate, right, being the federal government, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. government, the $10 bill saying, hey, this is $10 of value, right? But of course, you have the Nixon and the decoupling from gold. And so
Talk about that. What does that mean a little bit?
So
Just briefly.
Yeah. So when President Nixon took us off the gold standard, it really set the kind of future forward to where the federal government, without any rhyme or reason, can just unlimitedly print as much as they'd like,
Right,
right?
it used to
Because
be
there was
that
nothing having to back it.
So the cash was backed by gold until
Right.
Nixon.
Right.
And
Yep.
now it's backed by speculation?
Speculation. Yeah. I mean, it just like anything else, it's tyrannical in
This is
a
where
lot of
people
ways.
get lost, though, Jason.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand currency.
Right.
Most people don't get that.
Right.
What do you mean? I can buy something with this.
Right. Right.
And they're not understanding it.
And that maybe we go here is
Sure, go for it.
So the proof of work concept is kind of like we touched on in the beginning, is where all this perceived value comes from, right? So if I have a blank canvas, okay, and I'm an artist, and I say, hey, I take it to a show and say, hey, here's a blank canvas. How many people are going to want to buy a blank canvas?
Right.
Right? But if I work on that blank canvas, and I put effort, and the human, conscience and psyche knows, okay, there was something done here to derive what the asking price might be. Right. Then they say, oh, based off of the proof of, we don't know, we're not talking about it like this,
Sure.
but that's what is going on, is
Right.
when people perceive that there's been work that's taken to acquire something, then of course their ability to understand where the value is asked for comes from, So I'd say that to say this, that it's the same principle in Bitcoin, right? So just to keep the conversation easy,
Right.
is gold, right? What's the work done for gold?
They're digging, they're mining,
They're digging,
finding,
they're mining,
exploring,
they're finding, right?
treasure hunts. I
Right?
was watching something on Netflix
and
about
and
treasure hunts.
there's a proof of work, right?
Sure.
Because that there had to be some apparatus, a group of people, the logistics of getting to the mine and all that's found to extract the gold and bring it to market, right? And there's a general consensus around the world, because of how the history is played, that, okay, this gold is worth something, right? And so the same thing with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has a proof of work consensus as well, where when you mine Bitcoin, which are the miners we could get into, when you're mining for Bitcoin, that's all of the people that I talked about earlier that are solving that very complex equation of cryptography to essentially authenticate the transactions that are occurring with Bitcoin, and adding to the blockchain, which is where all those transactions are hosted, and again, being able to be reviewed later. But all of that, just kind of what I discussed just there, that's the work that's put in, okay, to achieve maintaining a Bitcoin digitally, right? To hold a Bitcoin, to acquire a Bitcoin, is that effort, okay, of those mining operators that are bringing and realizing the Bitcoin to the market. And then, because of that proof of work and the consensus through decentralization, that's where it says, oh, okay, Bitcoin is here. It's verifiable because this block was printed. This amount of Bitcoin was found and mined during this point in time, which a block is generated every 8 to 10 minutes or so. And again, if we need to talk backwards,
Right.
if you want to ask
But
any
no,
questions.
but we'll get in with that. So, all right, so we understand that. So like now what will hold most people back is the fact that they can't walk into, I've talked about this.
Yep.
We'll get to mining and blockchain. It's all
Yep.
interesting. We have to talk about that. But like what people, I can't walk into the mall and buy a television set using Bitcoin yet. Now, today in some places it's starting to become. Like
Right.
you have El Salvador, the whole country is using the currency,
Yep.
which is interesting. But, when it gets to that point, first of all, I guess, how does it get to that point? What's your opinion on how it gets to that point? And then I'll go into the finite amount, whether it's finite or not for the Bitcoin.
Sure.
But go ahead.
Yep. So how it gets to that kind of regular commerce is through stablecoins. So stablecoins are really kind of a remittance or settlement part of this whole equation within crypto, where a stablecoin is value backed by holding real world assets. So right now there's like USDT, USDC. DAI is another coin. I'll plug real quick. Mountain Protocol is another.
Those are tied to currency. Those are tied
yes.
to
So
dollars.
those-
USDT is tied to dollars.
Yes, so they're 1-for-1 to the U.S. dollar
Okay.
because of securities and different commodities that are held that are valued at a U.S. dollar equivalent, right?
Okay.
And so stable coins, what you can do is in the future, not what it will be in the future is you'll be able to go around and have stable coins, right? Be the transaction for the actual purchaser and seller. To be able to host the transaction and then be able to pull from a Bitcoin backed system. Okay, so the value that you hold, right? Let's just say in the future, if you want to spend off of that value, it will be able to be tied through programming, which is hosted on the blockchain. So there's all that security, which maybe again a second conversation, but that's how it will work. It will work by using stable coins in regular commerce to be able to not be all these fractionalized numbers. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is for people. A lot of it is, okay, wait a second. If a Bitcoin's $80,000 and I want to go buy a $5 item, how much decimal placing do I have to? Right, you know what I mean?
Like I was in Costa Rica, their colones is like 80,000 to 1.
Yeah,
Like,
right. So we already have that, and you see kind of how that creates, a void. But
Right, but let's talk about sorry to interrupt, but you have an example we talked about yesterday. And I said, well, what's the benefit? The people now are using credit cards and this. Why would they need to switch?
Right.
And you talked about the benefit about being in another country, the currency not being worth anything, or or bringing it into the country. Talk about that a little bit. I think that'll help explain.
So there's the few ways to think about value, right, for people and being able to maintain their own net worth, right? Like actually, because we're not all in America. There's some people that are in some very poor situations around the world.
Right.
And a lot of times what you'll see, and I'll give some examples, is you'll have a war-torn area, okay? You'll have people who are refugees and needing to leave, right? They leave with the clothes on their back, right? And whatever goods or things that they have to have value, right? And when they are doing this logistics process of trying to exit at a border, obviously the border is usually controlled by the group that's trying to suppress, right? So you get to that border, and all of a sudden, the gold piece of something from grandma, or just whatever it might be, can easily be identified and confiscated. Right, and then boom, it's over.
Like trying to take $10,000
and there's no courtroom.
anywhere.
Yeah, there's no courtroom at the border. There's no, and this is a real world problem for like 50% of the world.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we're not all, like I said, here in the U.S. or a first world country. So, so that's one way to think immediately about the impact that this can have globally.
Right.
And when you start thinking, if 50% of the world can have a positive impact from something like this, and it's the only thing that could ever provide this to them. I mean, it's the only technology right now in history and ever has been in human history that can provide the assurance, all right, and the security. So in the example where someone's fleeing and they have Bitcoin is, we all have our mobile phone, right? Or you can have, because you can have wallets on your mobile phone, you can have a cold storage wallet, like a ledger, which again is essentially connected to the internet. It enables you to make a purchase or acquisition of Bitcoin and then hold. So then you're decoupling from the internet and you have it just in this device, right? So if anyone's familiar with Ledger, it kind of looks like a jump drive. And that's the most secure way, by the way, to hold Bitcoin. But
And you take it anywhere with you, no
and you
matter
could
where
and you
you
can take it
are.
anywhere with you, right? So
Conversion,
now you're
whatever.
now you're the fleeing person.
Fleeing in not always an illegal way. We're saying leaving like oppressed country.
Correct.
Whatever,
Yeah.
right.
Correct. Yeah. And yeah.
Not fleeing and looting.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And the beautiful thing is because now you're like, oh, wait a second, what happens if the phone gets taken? Okay, what happens if the ledger gets taken? As long as you have your seed phrase, which is when you set up these cryptographic backed technologies, as long as you have that 12-word or sometimes it's a 24-word seed phrase, you can always retrieve that value, right? Because it is decentralized across the internet. It's not in some central authority. It wasn't in Chase Bank alone. It wasn't in the US government's control alone, okay? It was put out through other servers and across all of the participants of the internet to essentially verify and say, hey, even if the device, so if the hardware gets stolen or goes offline, as long as that person gets to wherever they're going and they acquire one more of these or they get another hardware ledger, if they have that seed phrase, they can retain and retrieve and retain all that value. And never before can you do that. I mean, that's a huge idea.
Huge. And if a country's currency collapses, if you don't have that currency, it doesn't matter. You have this international currency.
You have, yep, exactly. And again, there's no corruption that's even capable of entering into the Bitcoin marketplace because, again, it's not a centralized authority.
There's nobody holding
it. Was open source software that started all this.
Right. And so for the Silk Road example I just gave you,
Yep.
those are still out there? Those Bitcoins?
Yeah.
But he just doesn't
Now,
he doesn't have the address to get to them.
Correct. Yeah. Well, there's a few things that could have happened. Either personally, right, he doesn't have the seed phrase to be able to retrieve because time has passed. He just forgot. A lot of people had even acquired some, and then they used it for what their purpose was in 2008, 2009, 2012, and then they were like, this is really nothing because it seemed like it wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
So then they're lazy. They were lazy and they just forgot or misplaced things. So there's some of that.
So how does that get found? Sorry to interrupt, but so if that's out there,
Yeah.
and so there's a finite. First of all, let's go there. There's a finite amount of these coins created. Right?
21 million.
21.
That not today. There's about 19.5 or something. 19,500,000.
So, but when these people created, what's the real number they created?
They created for 21 million to ever be realized.
So there'll never be more than
There'll
21
never
million
be more than
Bitcoin.
21 million Bitcoin available in the market.
And when you say it's not realized, meaning that's where I think we bridge into what mining is.
Right.
Blockchain,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So how do they realize, how do you find these? How do people, tell me about what mining is.
Right. So mining right now, the Bitcoin network globally is supported with 1.2 million miners, right? So these are people who have invested in specific types of hardware. This hardware is operating on the Bitcoin network to support the transactions. Now,
And the transactions are called
are
blockchain.
the peer-to-peer. Well, the transactions are the transactions are presented on the blockchain and verifiable on the blockchain to view.
On the blockchain, this program can see Jason traded with Danny a Bitcoin,
Correct.
Or whatever it is.
And, well, the beautiful part too is it's not just Jason by my name; it's actually Jason by a.
The specific coin.
No, well, it's Jason with Bitcoin, but it's Jason by my unique identifier, right? So it's essentially this key for what makes my wallet that a lot of people will see might end in something random, 7QR capital R X3,
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you also have this unique identifier, okay? And when I want to transact with you, you share that unique identifier with me. And then I have it, so I can copy and paste it into my wallet. I can send you the value for whatever good or service that you're providing. And then what's happening is when I hit send, right, to get you paid,
Right.
it goes out into the decentralized network of those 1 point whatever million people that currently are supporting the network. They're doing that cryptography, so that cryptographic hash function. They're resolving, they're competing actually. So the mining rigs all around the world are competing to try to solve the authenticator, basically, equation.
To make
right?
sure it goes from one to the other.
To make sure it goes from one to the other. And all in these couple of seconds and minutes, It's also when the mining rig that achieved the authorization, it's also then sending out to all of the other miners on the block saying, hey, do we all reach consensus? Do we reach a consensus that my math was right? Yep. And that's kind of what people need to realize is it's not just some, buddy sitting in the back room, kind of guessing. This is very, very complex mathematics.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had a headache talking about it.
Yeah, happening on a large scale, and that large scale through decentralizing the effort and allowing multiple people, our peers, to participate, that should even make us more assured, right? Because there's millions of people that are ensuring that what is actually happening as far as a transfer of wealth has occurred, right? Is verifiable, has occurred, and they're
getting rewarded with a piece of the coin.
And that miner who solved the equation to essentially allow us to be a peer-to-peer transaction without the bank, without government, anything like that, they get a fractionalized reward.
And how do they find coins that aren't out there yet? When you say
that process,
so that creates another sliver of a coin.
Exactly. And so when that process is done, a block is printed. Okay, and then when that block is printed, the miners who essentially won the transaction battle to support you and I to be a peer-to-peer transfer, they are then getting the reward.
So at 21 million, these miners are out of business.
No, they're not out of business, and there's actually the people will talk and they're asking questions about that. They're not out of business. All that happens is they turn into nodes, okay? And we could go down that path.
No, let's not, but it might be too much.
So, well, to keep it easy,
right.
There's still gonna need to be the process of verification, right? But yes, ultimately there will be a realization of all the 21 million, and that also will happen in the year 2136, by the way. And so when that does occur, then yes, it'll be kind of a shift in the reward system, but you still will be able to tie in through a consensus mechanism, something to have that miner and have that infrastructure not be for nothing.
Well, they probably charge you for the transaction.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beautiful thing, because the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is, since it's at a consensus, it requires consensus of all of our peers, right? Not an authoritative body, okay? We can actually add, there's actually a BIP process. So Bitcoin improvement proposal is what it's called. And so developers, people that, again, I'm not a developer, but people that are developers, they can essentially create a Bitcoin improvement proposal. All right. And when that BIP is created, it goes into anyone who's developing on the Bitcoin network. So anyone who's helping to try to make Bitcoin better, they can give feedback. And then when consensus is reached, again, the consensus is a huge thing here that everyone should be very welcoming to, because consensus means that our peers, our general population of people who understand this, that have no, because it's open source, so they have no mal intent here, right? Because again, there's nothing. It's not a pyramid structure. This is a pie. It's a flat plane structure, and so improvements are just improvements. That improvement doesn't mean that more Bitcoin is going to go to someone else, right? So yeah, the long answer is 21 million will be realized in 2136, but what will happen is there'll be mechanisms that will be essentially updated and put in place at that time to reward these people for continuing to support the network.
So for the example of the Silk Road coins that are lost, can the miners find that if they're not being transacted, or are they just out in Neverland?
So they are out in Never Land. Yeah.
That's a shame.
Yeah, and so it's a shame to the independent perspective.
Sure.
Because you want to say, wow, I wish I had that money, right? Because why not? But in terms of an economic perspective,
doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. It actually helps, right? Because
it makes it more demand.
It makes it more demand. And so as people come to understand that, then of course the follow-up to that of anyone who's doubting or questioning is, well, wait a second, if they're offline, I mean, they're still online, they're still available,
They're still there,
but
right.
they're not accessible because it takes that peer, it takes one of our peers to actually spend it and put it back out, right? But if it's not, and let's say that there's 2 million Bitcoin that are unavailable, right? That would mean then, yeah, in 2136, there'd be 19 million Bitcoin that might be circulating actively, okay? But that's okay because it's an eighth decimal place option, right? As far as a value and a medium of exchange. So you can have even 1 million, right? But as people come to realize that holding it, okay, and that what it is compared to any other vehicle to spend on, well, number one, to generate wealth on, but then if you want to spend off of that wealth, the way that you can, because of the decimals, right, that are put in, it doesn't matter. It's still supply and demand.
Right.
So the demand is going to increasingly go up, even if wallets go offline and they're not active. But it just means that 101 of economics, supply, if there's not as much realized, demand goes up. And even if there's not as much circulating, it's still an eighth decimal place option as far as spending.
Are you concerned with the fact that there is a finite amount, but it seems to me that there's a lot of people that are onto this before the general public. So are you concerned that there's a small amount of people that hold a lot of these and that they can control the market so much? Because if I have 100 coins
Yeah.
and I sell 90, I can affect the price of the coin now, right?
Right.
I can go, sell it, make money, wait till it drops, buy it back in, come back out.
Of course. Of course.
Is that a concern?
I mean, it's a concern ethically, right? From the standpoint that, sure, manipulating any market would create fear, would create doubt and things like that. But it's still the best option in the digital future. It's still the option that we have.
Just to be clear, you're not getting charged. So just to be clear for the viewers, when we're saying best option, let's just talk economic for a second. When I use a credit card, I'm being charged interest.
Yep.
When the other person's getting charged as well. When I'm
card
holding in
company,
a card
the bank
company,
is
everybody's
taking it,
getting charged.
yep.
Someone's taking cuts from everywhere.
I think there's like
when
8
it's
layers
sitting in an
right
account,
now.
the bank is using my money.
Yep. And not giving you the money you should be getting.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They're giving you like bullshit interest.
And we've just been sold on that.
They're giving
That's
you
just
4 or
that's-
5% interest, and then they're making 25% of your money, right?
And good point. Remember,
Right.
that's just been because. There's never been anyone to tell us why that. Yeah,
Like, unless you're an economist,
Yeah.
or you're in economics,
Yeah.
not an economist, but a financial advisor,
Right.
whatever you may be, they don't understand that.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the funny thing that I hope in speaking with
people
you.
don't get it.
Right. Is talking about start asking that question.
Right.
Start waking up and saying to ourselves, wait a second.
What do I need these people for?
Yeah, exactly. We have governments and we have certain centralized authorities that have just told us that, hey, 3% is great on your money. Is it? What is your other option?
Right. That's just what the market
It's
says.
just
And
just
who
what
creates
and
that?
they create it, right? And so
But this is the only currency where you're literally. That's what everybody, I guess, means when they say it's under your control.
it's under our control.
Like
it's under the people's
my
control.
value is my value to you. Nobody's making a cut off of it. I'm not
Right.
paying a percentage,
Right.
and it can never happen.
Right.
Which is why I guess governments are so freaked out by this.
Exactly.
Taking their golden goose away.
That's
right?
exactly why. That's
Right.
exactly why. And
So-
there's and don't let that be fooled at all. There's all the FUD and all the things that are about, hey, only people that are involved in criminal activity, only corrupt governments are using this. All that is all just
their
that's
bullshit
all a
they're putting out
control mechanism. Yes. Yep. To just make people think, to slow down the process,
Right.
of adoption. And in a lot of instances, it's probably not appropriate to use certain names, but in a lot of instances, some of our leadership of both parties, right, in the United States, are actually creating that narrative. And just because of a degree of separation through a husband and wife, through a child, through an aunt and uncle, they're acquiring when they use their platforms. And the major financial institutions, especially for a while, which we'll get into maybe here in a second, but as they said, no, Bitcoin bad, Bitcoin bad, Bitcoin bad, through other means, acquiring it and adding it to their personal balance sheets.
Right. Or adding their own coins.
Right. Yeah. Right.
What are the right? These guys are launching coins.
Yeah.
Like, So what is the mimic that the governments are doing now? When we were talking about there's some things, don't
Yep.
be fooled, these aren't crypto coins.
Right. So
Talk to me about that.
CBDCs.
Yeah, talk about that. We don't have too much long, but let's talk about that.
So CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. They are created strictly to control the populace. What will happen is, a lot of people are hearing maybe even this and saying, all right, I'm still not really understanding it. I'm still kind of confused. But if it's digital, it must be crypto, right? Well, just because they will make digital options available to you that will be distributed by them, which is no different than the money today, okay?
Right.
They're going to, unfortunately, take a populace of people and because of their lack of really wanting or try to empower themselves with information, they're going to eat that up. And they're going to say, it's still crypto. It's digital. It makes,
Essentially wiring or credit card transactions.
Yeah. Except, again, it just does it even in a more controlled status, because with digital currency does come programmability, okay? Meaning that only in the CBDC realm, governments could, the value that they'll distribute, and then if you convert and you essentially hold that value in the United States CBDC of the future, the United States can then say, well, who's the person's name? Where do they live? What demographic are they? And if they don't like a certain criteria of things that they put to the value that you are willing to give up to them, then they can start like they did in Canada and say, these truckers, we don't like the opinion of the general, consensus of the truckers. Well, bank account's frozen. Family's not able to be supported.
They just have control.
They just have complete control. Right. And that is exactly what is going to happen if we go down that route.
So why does a country like El Salvador, for example, and look, that guy's doing different things there. Obviously, some people think he's controversial. Some people like him. Some people don't.
Right.
But to turn the country over to that currency, is he doing it for an investment for the country?
Yeah.
Is he doing?
Yeah.
He's losing control of the currency, but maybe.
Right. Well,
they were relying on U.S. dollar anyway.
I've heard it explained. I've heard, first of all, leaders who want to control their people are weak, right? And in most instances, okay, they don't have substantiated plans. You know what I mean? They don't have real foundational economic, forethought to actually empower. It's all about them, okay? And that's why you see these dictatorships and these things arise. Countries who have leaders that want to empower their people end up being heroes, like through that, distribution of power, and giving it to your people, you then receive more love and more adoration.
So you have other benefits.
You know what I mean? And so Bukele is, what he realized was he saw the value in Bitcoin, all right? And not being completely up to speed on exactly what El Salvador did, but I understand it to be that he took debt of the country and essentially anything that kind of was available in terms of GDP, he converted that into holding Bitcoin, going and buying and acquiring Bitcoin. At that time, I think it was in like the 20,000th, or 20,000, 30,000 or something. And now, of course, even when it was exceeding 100,000 through December and January, February, I think not only did that move take all of the national debt away from El Salvador, but it also, and sorry, forgive me, because I said something about GDP, but he didn't use the GDP mechanism, but he did do something where he pulled wealth, bought Bitcoin, and he not only erased all the national debt of El Salvador, but he did also create the first GDP productive El Salvador in like 24, 25 years. Right. So like completely changed the country around with making one investment decision as a leader. And then like within 4 or 5 years, it completely changed the country, like the fastest shift economically for a country ever.
Right. There's definitely a lot of shifting going on.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the volatility of it, though,
Yeah.
is this thing scary for a lot of people
Right.
because it goes up and down and up and down. And well, I mean, you want to speak to that a little bit? Because if I invest $10,000 and all of a sudden I'm a genius, I'm at $100,000, but then it goes down to 5,000. It's like
Right.
It's a wild ride, man.
Right. Yeah.
And not everybody has a stomach for it,
Yeah.
especially for the whole country's money in there.
Right.
You know?
Right. I would say this, in terms of volatility, so chaos breeds opportunity. And in terms of volatility and anything else where, markets are finding themselves, if you are someone who becomes aware, understands the message of today or through your own research, you start to just look at it as simple as economics 101, from high school or college or whatever. And
Which is not simple to a lot of people, but go ahead.
Yeah. But if you can start to wrap your head around, supply demand, how that curve shifts and adjusts, especially as, more of this demand is realized will be finite, right? Because that's the thing. A lot of people are like, okay, Bitcoin's circulating. Sure, it's always going to circulate. But the fact that we actually, for the first time in human history, have a potential to have a medium of exchange that cannot be more printed, that cannot be corrupted by government or any other centralized agency, when that actually enters the person's mind, people's minds, and they say, oh my gosh, another gold mine was found in China recently worth $83 billion. More art can come out of someone's head. A house can be built on land that's undeveloped, right? And more land, even if it's not on the beach, there is more land. You know what I mean? These other commodities, right? More wheat can be grown. More companies can be created, and through innovation derive value, right? These things, all of these things can be made more of. And as soon as people realize, okay, Bitcoin is a technology that I can trade with, is trustable, verifiable, divisible, right? Because you can't chop off $10 worth of a gold bar at the counter. You know what I mean? As people realize that this technology is perfect for the digital landscape of where we are today and will be in the future, it's good to be here. You know what I mean? It's good to have some Bitcoin, all right? And so to answer the question, a roundabout, is the volatility, yes, because it's an emerging market, okay, and crypto is just where we are in human history with it. There are opportunities to manipulate it, just like insider trading and certain things, right? Sure. But it doesn't mean that the technology in and of itself, at its foundation with blockchain and the security that's there, isn't a good technology, okay? Crypto is crypto. Blockchain is blockchain, okay? Meaning that the foundation of blockchain opens up a potential for a million other use cases, okay? Blockchain is also, though, a use case for traditional finance converting to decentralized finance.
Right.
You see what I mean? So blockchain can go into, like we kind of talked about at the bar, it can go into legal, it can go into accounting, it can go into contracts, for athletes and different things. It can go into housing and represent homes. Yeah, it's a ledger system. Crypto is just, and finance is just another field that blockchain can help to make better.
Understood.
Okay? So the volatility, I believe, just like with anything else, yes, it can be volatile and it will be volatile. But if you are holding it today and you're a 5, 10 year, 15 year
I was just going to say, let's for fun, give me
Yeah.
a 5, 10 year, 15 year outlook.
So this year, I think Bitcoin reaches 265 to 285.
This year, huh?
Right now it's about an $80,000, $85,000 asset. I think that in a 3 to 5 year landscape, you're looking at probably like a $1 million Bitcoin. I think that in a 5 year to 7 year, you're getting into the $4.5, $5 million range. I think in 10 years, we're sitting anywhere from 8 to 12. In 15 years, we're anywhere from 14 to 16. And then I truly do believe that in 15 to 20 years, we'll be at an 18 to $22 million Bitcoin.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Well,
and yeah.
Go get Bitcoin.
Yeah, go get Bitcoin.
Right? That's incredible. I mean, that's...
And can I comment on one thing real quick?
Sure, 100%.
That reason being is because, again, it's the aha, it's this wake up that people will have, they'll say, because of how transferable and tangible, like I know it's not physically tangible, but because of how accessible and divisible and the security by traveling, the logistics, you can't carry a $1 million worth of gold somewhere to make a purchase. You know what I mean? All of those principles will be where people will say, instead of having art, instead of having another building, instead of having these other investment vehicles, I'm going to put it in Bitcoin. So there's a ton of value and wealth that exists that will transfer to Bitcoin. as a medium of wealth generation and expenditure. That when all that's realized and that flood comes in, that's where those numbers come from.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming on, Jason.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate
Appreciate it.
And we'll have you on again. I'm sure I'll be bringing you on to kind of analyze things as they go.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you on. You did great.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, Danny.
And thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And to all my viewers, thanks for listening to Two Taps and Friends. I hope you enjoyed Jason. And we tried to break down the Bitcoin for you. It definitely helped me out.
And Danny, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I have one other thing?
Go ahead, sure.
Okay. There is one great video that I would like to plug.
Sure.
It's called God Bless Bitcoin. It was Brian Estes, the CIO and CEO of Off the Chain Capital. Great guy, great organization, great people. They have a great video on YouTube. It's an hour and 29 minutes. Explains a lot of other things, gives some illustrations, and it's a great video.
Definitely. Illustrations would definitely help. Well, thank you, Jason. And to all my viewers, thank you for listening to Two Taps and Friends. Please like and hope you enjoyed today, and hope Jason helped explain to you some of this. Everybody can kind of wrap their head around it. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We're on YouTube, YouTube Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're literally everywhere. Thank you for listening. Love you all. Goodbye. Cut.